Welcome to Inverted World. I am taking over, at least for today. I'm Dylan's fiance and one of the leaders of the New York medical freedom movement. Now that we're a few years out of the pandemic, a lot of people ask me, how did you know? How did you know what was going on? And you want to know the truth? One word. Pinocchio. Let me explain. I teach archetypal psychology using Disney films to kids. It was uncanny how the lessons that I taught in Pinocchio prepared me for what was to come during the pandemic. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Help us build the inverted world.
Help us build the inverted world community. The story was first written in 1883, and it was more recently adapted by Guillermo del Toro in Mussolini's fascist Italy, and that was no accident.
I felt that for the puppet to belong to the same world, everybody had to be a puppet. And it's a story about, it's set during the rise of Mussolini, and it's the only character that doesn't behave like a puppet is the puppet. He's very a free thinker.
So how did Pinocchio prepare me to do things like this? You're gonna put your hands on me and arrest me over a mask, okay?
You're gonna be arrested too.
Or this.
For kids to be looking at this, is that okay?
How do you prevent yourself, your kids, from differentiating between propaganda, brainwashing, and the truth? And how do we protect our own individual sovereignty, our own psyche during tumultuous times? Let's start with the very title, Pinocchio. Pinocchio is made of pine wood, which refers to the pineal gland, or the third eye. It's also why you see pine cones in the Vatican. The pineal gland is a small endocrine gland, and to this day, it's a mystery how it affects our dreams. The reason why propaganda, or even stories like Pinocchio, are so effective is because they operate in the realm of the unconscious mind. On the surface, why does a story of a puppet who gets swallowed up by a whale, has a nose that grows when he lies, how does that make sense whatsoever? Maybe it's because the nature of a lie is that it grows and grows and grows until it becomes as obvious as the nose on your face? Or is it the invisible strings that once pulled can convince us or coerce us to do things like putting a medical experiment into our body? Let's get into it. We have Geppetto, who is the representation of the good father, the perfect father. He sends Pinocchio off to school. I'm not the biggest proponent of compulsory education, and I get it. The education system seems to be proponents of churning out puppets, but let's put that aside for now. For the purposes of Pinocchio, Geppetto archetypally is sending him off into a world and is doing what he can to get properly socialized in this world, what a parent's main job is.
What are those? Huh? Oh, those. They are your schoolmates, girls and boys, and then now get into them. Real boys?
Jordan Peterson describes it really well here.
The 2-year-old's a collection of these sort of random motivations, more or less gets his or her act together by about 3 if they're being socialized properly, and that means that the parents are doing their best to make the child acceptable to other children. That's your damn job as a parent. You have to understand that, because if your child isn't acceptable to other children, they won't play with your child. And then your child will be lonesome and isolated and awkward, and they will never recover. Because if the kid doesn't get that right between 2 and 4, it's over. They're never going to learn it. The other kids accelerate forward, that kid's left behind.
That is why I personally found that masking of 2 to 4-year-olds was especially egregious. FYI, the iPad isn't a good substitute either. It damages reward circuitry, attention span, the retina, the ability to form relationships, so please be wary with iPads. So this portion is what I like to call Pinocchio gets a PCR test. Pinocchio here gets approached by 2 low-level crooks. Honest John, who is anything but honest, but you know, good marketing, and his mute sidekick Gideon. And yes, let me start off by saying of course I believe COVID is real. That was kind of crazy to see how many people just assumed I was a conspiracy theorist, assumed that I thought the whole thing was a hoax. And my heart goes out to anyone out there who got sick, who lost a loved one. But that being said, the PCR tests, they're kind of full of crap, no?
We're using this thing that's not really a test, it's a process called PCR, and depending upon the cycle threshold, you get a 97% false positive.
In this scene, you see Pinocchio, who is completely healthy, but he is convinced by Honest John and Gideon that he's sick. Again, I'm not saying that people weren't sick, that people didn't die, but then I do believe it was blown out of proportion. And a lot of fear was pumped into us through the use of propaganda. And can somebody explain to me what happened to the flu? Why did the flu all of a sudden disappear during COVID? You see in this clip how Pinocchio, even though he was perfectly fine, was convinced that he was sick. And many people who are taking those PCR tests, they may just have a cold, they might have the flu, but everything was being diagnosed as during that time. He's being fed a lot of nonsense. Remember the term, follow the science, just follow the science?
Oh, my goodness! A palpitating syncopation of the dilladilla.
Well, guess what? It ain't science if you can't question it. It ain't science if you're censoring, smearing doctors, or even regular citizens who want to debate the issue. And when you have corporations, pharmaceutical companies, media, trying to convince you of something that you are not, convincing you that you're sick, that they have a cure, and they so happen to be profiting from that cure, something is a bit sus, no? Here we're seeing Pinocchio given an identity of victimhood, and he takes it. He's also offered a cure in the form of a ticket to Pleasure Island.
My boy, you are allergic.
Allergic?
Yes, and there is only one cure. A vacation on Pleasure Island.
Pleasure Island?
Which is another way of saying, here's an unrealistic opportunity that's too good to be true to abandon all responsibility.
We see here the supposed cure which he's told would be found in Pleasure Island actually makes him sick.
Well, everyone else is falling for it. That's called societal pathology, and you don't need to go along with it. Trust me, you do not need anyone's approval. I know we're societal beings and relationships are really important, but when it comes to your own individual sovereignty, it's precious. Don't give that up freely and easily. Just because people around you are blind and afraid doesn't mean you have to get swept along with it too. Pleasure Island. This is a terrifying scene. This is the face of pure evil. So evil that Honest John and Gideon stand no match, and they're terrified. The coachman is the man behind Pleasure Island, a place that lures vulnerable children towards acts of immorality through the use of drinking, smoking, destruction, and other temporal pleasures and vices.
The rough house, it's the roughest, toughest joint you ever seen.
In this particular scene, you see how the coachman deciphers between a kid that has made his full transformation into an enslaved donkey and those who still need more time.
So you can talk.
Yes, sir. I want to go home to my mama.
Take him back. He can still talk.
By the way, the donkey represents the beast of burden. It's interesting to see how the determination of speech is indication of whether a person is enslaved or not. How many people were afraid to speak during the pandemic? How many times did I hear the term the silent majority? A nod to the importance of speech is made when we first see Pinocchio with no mouth. The good father paints a smile and everyone celebrates except in this one moment.
Well, you can't please everybody.
This foreshadows the tyrannical father that we see exemplified in the puppet master Stromboli and in the coachman. Aldous Huxley and George Orwell both painted a dystopian future. But what differed Huxley from Orwell was Orwell believed in a future in which you go to a library, for instance, and you see passages or sentences blacked out, censored. Whereas Huxley imagined a future where people were so inundated with pleasure that they had no motivation to pick up a book. The legalization of weed, liquor stores, porn shops, all deemed essential.
Free fries when you get vaccinated? Just think of this when you think of vaccination. Vaccination.
It wasn't just burgers. It was also lap dances, donuts, and Metro cards. We'll give you $100 if you give your kid a shot. It becomes comically obvious what's going on. Lampwick is a boy that takes Pinocchio under his wing while they're at Pleasure Island. He's unhappy with the world. He acts like he knows everything, like culture and society holds no utility. Once again, let's look at his name, Lampwick. Lucifer, his name means the light bearer. He was the highest angel that was jealous of God, and he got cast out of heaven. Lampwick symbolized that jealousy, that premature cynicism, his nihilism. Jiminy Cricket, of course, who famously symbolizes Pinocchio's conscience, interacts with Lampwick.
Who's the beetle?
He's my conscience. He tells me what's right and wrong.
What? You mean to tell me you take orders from a grasshopper?
And you see in this moment, he doesn't recognize what he is. You see how he mocks the very concept of a conscience. And what is a conscience exactly? It's the very thing that bugs you, right? It's no accident that Jiminy Cricket is a bug. It's also no accident that his name is Jiminy Cricket. It's what people in the South would refer to Jesus Christ, JC, Jiminy Cricket, right? The thing about the conscience is that you can override it. And you actually find in the movie that Jiminy Cricket isn't actually the best conscience in the world. We first see him in rags. He's arrogant, he gets confused, he's late for his first day at work, but he shows up and he contends with Pinocchio. He helps him, even though he himself might not even agree with him.
But this monstro, I've heard of him. He's a whale of a whale. Why, he swallows whole ships alive. Tie it good and tight now. And besides, it's dangerous. Why,
Bye, Jiminy.
Goodbye. I may be live bait down there, but I'm with you. Come on. Let's go.
Their bond gets stronger and stronger. And that's what we all need to do, to nurture that inner voice that's within all of us. It's there. Engage with it. That's a relationship worth nurturing, worth contending with. Let's go back to this moment where we see Lampwick throwing a brick into this glass mandala. The mandala represents the unified self, the wholly integrated self. This instinct that we see in Lampwick to destroy comes from the desire to kill the thing that judges you, wanting to tear down what is beautiful because it reflects what you aren't or what you think you cannot achieve. We've seen this many times through history, and we may even see it within ourselves. But what happens when we take on the role of victimhood, when we don't aim high towards that North Star, when you don't acknowledge the parts of yourself that still needs to grow, that is still aiming downwards rather than upwards, that's when the propaganda actually works. So next time you see the signs of tyranny, and that tyranny can even be found within yourself, do not be gripped by fear. Do not cower by material possessions or the beliefs of the herd. Do not focus solely on what is your right, but what is most righteous. And it's okay to get tangled up here and there. We still love you. But if you're like Pinocchio and desire to be real, always look upwards, bravely stand by and for truth, and build that relationship with your inner voice to set yourself straight.
Prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, and someday you will be a real boy.
A real boy!
Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and share. Until next time, thank you for watching Inverted World.
I got no strings to hold me down, to make me fret or make me frown.